public is being conditioned to look for missiles, for carrier strike groups on a launch-on-warning posture. This is a strategic deception. The decision to halt kinetic strikes on Iran, a move Benjamin Netanyahu urged upon the US, according to the Jerusalem Post, was not a failure of will. It was a mathematical calculation of asymmetric escalation. The kinetic cost of a direct confrontation is now outweighed by the certainty of an unpredictable, disproportionate counterattack. The age of symmetric warfare is over. The real vector is not an explosion. It is silence, a targeted, systemic paralysis. According to CSIS analysis, over 97% of global data, including trillions in daily financial transactions, travels through a few hundred undersea fiber optic cables. These are the arteries of the global economy. Their locations are public knowledge. They are, by design, a systemic liability. The second vector of this silent war is not on the ocean floor, but in low Earth orbit. The protocol is not kinetic destruction, but non-attributable sensory denial. RUSI reports detail the increasing proliferation of ground-based directed energy weapons capable of dazzling or permanently blinding imaging and communication satellites. No debris, no launch signature. GPS grids fail. Military communications go dark. The entire intelligence apparatus is rendered inert. This dual-front assault on the West's sensory apparatus is engineered to create one outcome: the blind Leviathan. A state with unparalleled military and economic mass, but its central nervous system has been severed. It possesses carrier groups it cannot deploy, financial assets it cannot clear, and a power grid it cannot manage. This engineered paralysis is the precondition for the true objective: a systemic solvency crisis, triggered on demand. The pivot to asymmetric warfare is not a choice made from strength. It is a mathematical function of weakness. When a state can no longer compete symmetrically, either militarily or economically, it doesn't surrender. It changes the rules of the game. This isn't a theory, it's a diagnosis. Case study: the Russian Federation. The kinetic operation in Ukraine is frequently misdiagnosed as a land grab. The core driver is a solvency crisis. Analysis from RUSI and CSIS confirms that prior to the conflict, the state faced systemic domestic liabilities and a deeply unpopular war footing. This wasn't an act of expansion, it was an act of financial desperation. A symmetric, protracted war is a liability Russia cannot afford. The kinetic cost of matching Western hardware is an accelerant for bankruptcy. This weakness forces a pivot. If you cannot win a dollar-denominated conflict, you must create a new vector of attack that de-dollarizes the battlefield. This is the motive. The weakness is the trigger. Confronted with a launch-on-warning economic sanction system, a state facing insolvency has only one logical move: neutralize the weapon. Develop asymmetric protocols that turn the West's primary strength, control of the financial system, into its primary vulnerability. The central mechanism driving asymmetric escalation is not ideology. It is brutal, simple math. The Royal United Services Institute, or RUSI, quantifies the new battlefield calculus. A $5 million main battle tank is now a target for a $500 FPV drone. This is not a 10-to-1 or 100-to-1 cost disparity. It is a 10,000-to-1 cost asymmetry. This is a solvency crisis expressed through kinetic action. A nation-state cannot sustain asset attrition at this ratio. For every complex billion-dollar weapons platform deployed, an adversary can launch thousands of low-cost, disposable threats. Each successful drone strike does not just destroy a piece of hardware, it liquidates a massive financial and logistical investment. This turns our primary military strength, technological superiority into a systemic economic liability. The adversary is no longer targeting our military. They are targeting our treasury, using our own platforms as the vector for capital destruction. This phenomenon is termed the democratization of violence. The barrier to entry for projecting lethal, state-level force has effectively collapsed. What once required a national industrial base now requires a 3D printer and commercially available electronics. This is not a linear evolution in warfare. It is a fundamental inversion of the kinetic cost curve, making conventional military dominance a predictable and exploitable vulnerability. The regional instability reported by legacy media is a deliberate misdirection. Events in jurisdictions like South Africa or the solvency warnings flagged by agencies like CSIS regarding internal Western economies are not the core threat. They are symptoms. These regions function as gray zones, proxy laboratories for calibrating asymmetric attacks. In these low-cost, plausibly deniable theaters, adversaries test vectors of systemic disruption. They measure the precise kinetic cost required to fracture a supply chain, the exact digital accelerant needed to trigger a bank run, and the specific narrative payload that maximizes political polarization. This is not chaos. It is a live-fire exercise. The data gathered is used to refine the blueprint for deployment against primary targets. The instability is a feature, not a bug, a staging ground for a launch-on-warning protocol aimed at Western economic and social cohesion. The final war will not be triggered by a missile. It will be triggered by a protocol. This protocol is known as launch-on-warning. CSIS analysis confirms this doctrine is designed to prevent a successful first strike against a nation's nuclear arsenal. The logic is a mathematical certainty. Once early warning radar detects incoming intercontinental ballistic missiles, a retaliatory launch is initiated before the incoming warheads arrive. Waiting for impact is not an option, as it guarantees the destruction of your own capacity to retaliate. This entire system, however, has a single point of failure: the data feed. An asymmetric adversary will not attempt to match our missile count. They will execute a cyber attack to blind the early warning radar system. This creates an information vacuum, a strategic condition analysts at RUSI refer to as the fog of digital war. The screens do not show an attack. They show nothing. No signal. Data corrupted. The commander is now forced into a zero-sum calculation. Is this a system malfunction, or is it the prelude to a decapitation strike designed to neutralize command and control? The protocol is unforgiving. A loss of sensory data is, itself, a potential trigger. The fear of being rendered defenseless forces the commander to consider a launch based not on what he sees, but on what he cannot see. Our greatest strength, a rapid, automated response system, becomes the ultimate systemic liability. It is the perfect asymmetric trap. The doctrine of launch-on-warning is no longer confined to nuclear silos. It has been reverse-engineered and applied to economic systems. An adversary does not need to launch a missile to test a response. They can simply unplug a server. This is the calibration shot, a non-kinetic probe designed to measure systemic fragility and political response time under the cover of plausible deniability. The West's kinetic overmatch is now a strategic liability. The decision to halt direct strikes on Iran was not a gesture of peace. It was a mathematical calculation of risk. Reports from the Jerusalem Post confirm that even allies feared a disproportionate, unpredictable counterattack that would exceed the initial kinetic cost. This restraint signals a vulnerability. Our adversaries know we fear asymmetric escalation more than a symmetric fight. While kinetic options are deferred, the economic vector accelerates. Reuters sources confirm India's proposal to link BRICS's digital currencies, architecting a parallel financial protocol immune to Western sanctions. This is the blueprint for long-term de-dollarization. The military front is a stalemate of fear. The economic front is a long-term siege. Therefore, the next logical move is a short-term, physical domain test with economic consequences. According to RUSI threat models, the ideal target combines physical logistics and digital finance, exploiting the seam between private sector assets and national security. The calibration shot will therefore be a cascading, attribution impossible failure designed to measure the lag time between physical disruption and financial panic. Within the next 12 months, expect a simultaneous disruption of a major automated container port, like Long Beach or Rotterdam, and its adjacent financial data infrastructure. The event will be a no-fault blackout lasting approximately 18 hours, attributed to a cascading software update failure or anomalous solar flare activity. It is not an attack. It is a range-finding exercise to quantify the precise economic cost of a day's paralysis, providing the data needed for a future solvency crisis.